in, that's how tight they are. I know a lot of the front wheels, back wheels, they just have plates that pop in. DT Swiss does it on their hubs. There's no adjusting to it. You put the bearing in, you put the hub caps in, and that's it. There is no adjustment above and beyond that. It was meant to be, they're trying to make it as low maintenance as possible. And that's what Shimano's done with like the new electronic shifting systems. They've made them to where they're a near zero maintenance system. That cable that I passed around, you don't have that deterioration with the electronic shifting. There's no cable stretch, there's no outside contaminants that get down in the housing. The cable doesn't fray, the head doesn't break off of it. I mean, unless you bend your derailleur, there's really no adjustments that need to be made if everything's in aligned and in working order.
How long do batteries last?
Electronic shifting batteries typically last about 1,500 miles.
They give you warning before they go?
The front derailleur on the Shimano system will stop shifting before the back wheel as an indicator that it's going out. It takes 4 times the juice to shift the front derailleur than it does the back. So it's just set up for this stops working before the back does. Some people get longer lifespan out of them that don't shift the front hardly ever. They'll stay in the big ring and just ride. You get longer battery life out of it.
They typically have a battery level indicator, don't they?
Yes, there's a battery level indicator on the front. You just hold in one of the shifting paddles on it for 2 or 3 seconds, and it'll either show up green or red where it needs to be charged. But it only takes 90 minutes from a dead stop, and just a completely drained battery, to charge them back up.
Are they lithium ion or what kind of?
They are. And I haven't seen anything as far as a battery lifespan on those. They've been out for a while, and I don't know anybody that's had to replace any.
You referenced modern bikes. What's that mean? Like 2005 and beyond, or what?
Depends on really the price point of the bike. There are still bikes that use a square tapered crankset down here that have a fully internal bearing setup on it. I mean, we have bikes out there on the floor now that are doing. But once really anything within the last few years, it's been at that about $800 price point and above. Usually has either a press fit bearing system or an external bearing like this does. And it's just the bolt style, the Allen bolt that actually fixes. See, this doesn't have an Allen bolt right there to fix it on. The spindle and this crank arm are all one piece, and then there's a fixing bolt on this side, and it uses a special Shimano tool basically to tighten down and preload the bearing, and then you torque the pinch bolts.
So is that harder to work on if you're just doing it yourself?
No, it actually is much less frustration getting these cranks apart than the old ones, because the old ones were a friction press fit. Depending on how tight they were, the spindles were actually tapered, and whenever that pressed on, there was no grease nobody put on them, because if you put grease, the friction fit didn't stay. These are splined, and they use a pinch bolt. It's much easier. You can just loosen 2 bolts, take the compression cap out, and the arm slides completely off, instead of having to use a special remover tool that, in a lot of cases, would strip out if it was a real tight fit, you'd a lot of times strip out the crank arm trying to get it off. Then you had to get over ball joint car tool and potentially tear something up if you wanted to get it off, or cut it off.
Hello. Doing well, how are you?
They've gotten easier to work on in the last several years. There's really less maintenance. Every year they try to get better and better as far as less maintenance that you have to do to it. But until, bikes are still just a whole series of simple machines. You're always going to have friction with chains. You're always going to have friction on pulleys, cables. You're always going to have anything that's a cable-driven system like this. And you can pull this out right here. Of course, with the chain off of it, it's a little bit harder to do. You have access to lube the cables pretty easily. You pop them out of the holder right there, and you can actually just put the lube on it and pull them back up, and then you have a nice smooth shifting system again. But the liners inside the housing right there, this is a metal coil with a Teflon liner inside of it, and then after a while that Teflon liner wears through, then you have metal on metal contact with your cable and housing, which is what happened to wherever it's at, that one back there. versus I made a brand new cable set up this morning for that one. And it's got a coated cable with a brand new line housing on it. And it just is a lot smoother, there's a lot less friction on it. It's usually not the upshift that's ever a problem whenever the cables get like that. But generally, unless it's extremely severe, you'll still upshift to a higher gear. But the problem is whenever you downshift, the springs that pull the derailleurs back into its natural position aren't strong enough to overcome the friction that's in the cables. That's where you usually have the problem on shifting, is usually on the downshift.
Do you use a different lube on the cable housings, or?
I use the Triflow on the cable housing. I've used this for a long time. It's just a Teflon based lube. It goes on wet, then it has a solvent in there that evaporates and leaves a Teflon coating on your cable. Some cables are made,
Cables last.
depends on how much you shift and the conditions you ride in. It's hard to put a time frame on a lot of things. Just like tires, you know, tires can last, some people get 3,000 miles, 4,000 miles out of a tire, where another rider might only get 1,500 to 2,000 out of a tire. But if you have a 110-pound rider versus a 200-pound rider, then you got somebody that's riding on cleaner roads. There's not as much glass, not as much sand, debris. I mean, that all makes a big difference on it. The majority of the rider's weight is over the back of the bike, so heavier riders definitely tend to wear out tires much faster.
Like for mine and his bike,
Mhm.
how long should we put, before we put that in?
What,
The stuff you just.
like this right here? Every time you have your bikes in here, I always do that. That's one of the things I go over. I do it on my personal bikes. I'll probably do it once a month. But you just feel, whenever you're shifting the gears, you can feel it. It just takes a little bit more effort. I mean, it never hurts. You're not going to hurt anything putting it on there, as long as you don't have an excessive amount of oil just splashed all over the frame. If you wipe off any kind of excess, you can do it. You can do it once a week. I used to ride with a guy that he would take his chain off his bike, soak it, and clean it every single time that he rode the bike. He had the cleanest, shiniest chain I've ever seen in my life. But his chain it lasted forever. I mean, he got the most miles out of it because he kept it clean. That's all that stuff. Any kind of friction wears and tears on the drivetrain. A lot of people don't think about chains as being a wear item, but they are. The plates in between the pins stretch or lengthen, as they call it, and there's tools that go in there and actually show you how much it's stretched. This chain, obviously it's brand new, so it doesn't hardly move as far as the gauge. Some of them will come all the way over and do that, and then you still got play side to side. And that's, whenever it gets that bad, that's when you're looking at, did I wait too long to replace my chain? Because the cogs wear to the chain. If the pins are on half-inch center-to-center spacing on all bikes, or most bikes actually, anything made anytime recently within the last 50 years are all half-inch spacing pin to pin. And once that lengthens, it'll actually start wearing in to where the cogs actually have like a shark fin shape to them instead of having the nice pointed tops to them. And the center of the grooves get stretched or worn on more than half-inch centers. When you put a new chain on there, it'll pop and skip and won't pedal. You're like, I just put a new chain on my bike. How come it worked better with the old one on there? So, well, because all your cogs are worn to the pattern of your old chain, and then you got to replace all of it. So, you know, a new chain's always much cheaper than having to replace every cog on your bike.
When you take the chain off, does it have to go back on? Is it directional?
Some chains are directional, some aren't. Some of the newer Shimano chains are directional. Anything from the last 3 or 4 years, maybe even 5 years, that's either a Ultegra or Dura-Ace quality chain is usually directional. It has the instructions in the bag on the chains if you ever put one on, how to cut it to the right length and which side faces in or out. The Shimano chains that are directional have a hollow plate on the inner plate and outer plate, and those face on the inside of the bikes. They use a full plate on the outside because that's what rubs up against your cog when you're shifting up and make it more durable. but most chains aren't directional, just Shimano for the most part. If anybody was wanting to go over that I didn't talk about, or I did a poor job explaining on.
Our brakes,
Mm-hmm. Hydraulic disc.
yeah.
Hydraulic disc brakes are run off of a sealed system.
So there's not much.
There's not, I mean, just like an automobile, hydraulic disc brakes on bikes, as you apply it, it actually generates heat and it goes up and builds up heat all the way throughout the housing and can actually get into, under heavy braking, you can, in some cases, even boil the
Yeah.
fluid inside there. And the fluid does need to be changed every couple of years on those.
Wow.
Like on your front brake,
Yeah.
yeah, you actually had fluid build up in it. I had to drain some out, yesterday. It happens though, it's not, I mean, the front brake's 80% of your stopping power on a bike. As you get on the brakes, all the way the bike goes forward, it unloads the back tire and the weight comes off of it, and it all concentrates down on a small patch, about that big on the front of the bike. And that's where all your pressure goes. Very good.
Do you use a torque wrench, Ryan, when you put yours together? Have
Yes.
you done it long enough? You don't?
No, I still use a torque wrench. It's the torque wrench I have is a little torque key, so it's just it has interchangeable bits out on it, and you just put it in there and turn it and click it. I've got 3 or 4 torque wrenches, the big long ones, but the torque wrenches have gotten so much nicer now that it's about that big, and it's just on a little bitty Allen key, and you just twist it, and it's usually for your lower torque items, your 4 to 6 Newton meter torque items. So on cranksets, you have got the big torque wrench, anything that's usually 35 to 50 Newton meters of torque, we get out the bigger wrench, like on some of the cranksets. Everything's so light, fine thread, aluminum, you've got to be really, really careful not to over tighten any of the bolts. Because the aluminum can crush just as easy as the carbon can. Everything on the aluminum, you can sit here and grab this frame. It's so thin walled, so lightweight, you can press down on there and just with the reflection of the lights, I can see the flex in the material right there, and all bikes are like that. But they just make them so lightweight, so thin walled tubing now with the oversized shapes to make the bikes lightweight and ride good. You just gotta be careful not to tear them up over tightening things.
So you always use a seat post when you're putting them on your,
Depends on the thing. This is an aluminum seat post, so you can clamp down on it. Carbon frames, I have a dummy seat post that a lot of times I'll put in there. And then even some frames, you can't do that on at all. We've got a stand that clamps on, you take the front wheel out, and it's clamps onto there, so it actually doesn't touch anything on the frame or clamp down on it anywhere. I've seen people crack their frames, crack their seat posts just by putting it in a repair stand. Too tight.
If
that's
you-
mostly on carbon though?
Yes, almost always on carbon. I have seen somebody dimple an aluminum frame, clamping down on it. They got in there and wrapped it around their seat tube, which you should never do on any kind of frame. But they clamped down on there on a real thin walled aluminum frame, and it actually crushed. It wasn't severe, but it was definitely, it's noticeable.
If you crack a carbon frame, anything you can do with it?
Yeah, actually there is. Carbon frames can be repaired easier than aluminum frames can. The aluminum frames, again, are so thin that you can't really re-weld them because it generates so much heat it'll just melt it off.
Yeah.
Carbon, just lay it up like fiberglass, as long as you have this right kind of carbon and the layers are laid in the same direction. Most of the carbon frames now use a unidirectional carbon, but as long as you have a similar resin and someone that knows what they're doing.
Have you done that?
No, that's I'm not into carbon repair,
Yeah.
but there's a guy here in town that's done a few for me that I've had him do, and there's a company that we've sent off to in the past that have done some carbon frame repair, and they do a really good job. But that's what they do. I don't do it on a regular enough basis to where it would be
That's probably not.
beneficial
cheap
for me
either.
to. No, it's not. I mean, a lot of times, you know, but it's, if you have a $5,000 high-end carbon frame only that you broke, I mean, if it's gonna cost you $800 to have it fixed, it's a lot cheaper than buying a new frame. And with carbon repair, it's every bit as structurally sound as before the crash. And they've got such a good job of redoing the graphics and redoing the paint job on them. A lot of times you can't even tell that it was ever had anything wrong with it, which is good and bad. It's kind of scary if you're looking to buy a used item, you don't ever know it's been,
Right.
it's never been broken or repaired, but they do a good job with them.
We were talking about those electric shifters, what do they work on? They all have to be 10-speed and stuff, so that's the only thing they're made for?
10 and 11,
10 and 11.
right now. I mean, there's some people that have got in and hacked the firmware, and I mean, it's a computer. You can, I mean, ultimately anything's possible. There's guys that have done it. I am doing a project this winter, putting one on a recumbent, doing a rear electric shift on a long wheelbase. But
9 speed, I'm assuming.
10.
Oh, it's a 10,
Yeah,
okay.
it'll be a 3x10 setup on it. The front shifter is going to be regular, and the back one's going to be push button electronic. We'll just use one of the climbing shifter sets, just one of the toggle switches up there on the handlebar, and you'll have an up and down shift on one side, and you'll have your twist grip on the other for the front and rear. With the old stuff, you couldn't do that, but they've gotten to the point now with the electric shift that you can kind of run a single item on it instead of having to run the whole system as one. You used to have a closed loop, and you have to have everything plugged in and everything on the original stuff. The newer stuff now has got where you can just have one item in, have the battery, have the shifter head on there, and it all works. But it's interesting. You're going to start seeing, I mean, that stuff's amazingly waterproof. It's durable. There's cyclocross racing with it. You'll start seeing mountain bikes have electric shift on them. Probably 1 to 2 years. There's kits out there you can do it. You can build your own, but you probably start seeing production stuff in the next couple of years. Same thing with disc brakes on road bikes. You're going to start seeing that more and more. You've seen a little bit of it out now, but until UCI legalizes it to actually be raced with, you won't see it go mainstream, because none of the companies are going to put their pros on a bike that you can't buy.
It's some-
Or they're not going to have them.
They're an advantage for touring.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely can. You don't have the heat buildup in the braking service.
Do the electric shifters shift as quick as the
Yes,
manual,
Yep.
or whatever you wanna call it?
they do. And you can actually turn up or turn down how fast they shift. We have, we're fully Shimano certified for cable and electronic shift systems. We have their diagnostics box and their diagnostic software. So we can plug your electric shift bike up into a laptop, and I can change what every single button does. You can change the shift speed. You can make them sequential. You can do tons of stuff with the electric shift. But it's, you know, you work on a bike with a laptop now.
Cool.
Yeah. It's pretty neat. We had, I've only had one electric shift bike that actually had an electronic little gremlin that wasn't showing up on the diagnostic software. And after replacing piece by piece, we found out it was a bad battery mount. But I've done, I don't know how many electric shift systems, and that's the only one that I've ever had a problem. And Shimano's good about it. You know, they're great about replacing it. They took care of, by any means necessary, making sure it was right. But it was just on that particular case, it was kind of a trial and error thing, because it wasn't showing up on the diagnostic system what was wrong with it. So you had to go through and just do piece by piece by piece until you got there. We good? Can answer questions online. Good deal. I think Angela had some giveaways, some drawings. What you got there, Angela?
We had church, unless you had anything from the department too. I
Um,
had different sizes in the back though. I
Yeah.
just had these out.
The bike would be nice.
I'll make your size.
I'd sell it.
Unless you're give away free samples of the Park Tools?
Park tools, no.